Hello, my name is Simon Atkinson. I'm going to talk about the fifth of the design approaches, that of inquiry based. Sometimes we've referred to this in our writings as problem solving. It is just one of 10 learning designs which are being explored as part of the DIAL-E framework. And the language that we use is evolving, and so you'll see this referred to as problem solving. We're thinking of this also in terms of problem-based learning and inquiry. I'm going to use the term inquiry to cover a multitude of things. What we're looking at is the explicit and deliberate process of investigating, developing, augmenting the amount of knowledge that is being given, to look to try and identify where there are gaps in knowledge and for students themselves to go out and fill those gaps, to solve a problem by cross-referencing information and so on. And we take this to involve very large-scale, long-term activities which might take place over an entire module or even an entire course and be part of an approach to learning. Or it may actually feature simply within a single case study or a single activity within a course, or even within a single session if one is simply trying to get students to engage in some of the underlying skills. And the skills obviously are very varied. The important thing here is that we're asking students to do something very real. This is not an abstract problem solving activity. This is something that solves problems within the real world. These are authentic problems. They have to be believable by the students who are undertaking them. And so this is looking for something which is a representation of a real life scenario which a student is going to investigate. And the skills that we're talking about are many of those dealt with earlier under the conceptual learning design, those of analysis, of synthesis, and so on. As an example, a very simple example, I would pose this question of students before pointing them at all of the resources that we've been discussing. There's a suggestion that this takes place in December 1891. We've identified that Albert Barrow is a Londoner. We've identified that he's unmarried. We've identified that he's 23 and unskilled. And we've suggested he lives in the shadow of City Prison, although we haven't actually said where City Prison is. There may be a clue in the fact that Albert's a Londoner. And another clue in the fact that he walks to work at Hampstead Ponds. There may be more than one Hampstead Ponds in the country, but possibly not within walking distance of City Prison, and perhaps not for a Londoner. And the question might seem overly simplistic. So how many times does he cross a railway line? But in fact, when one starts to then engage with the resources, one is asking a great number of questions about how the geography and environment is changing over time, and at this particular time, how reliable the resources are, how many different bits of information need to be cross-referenced to ensure their validity, and so on. And my starting point would be to point students at the HISPOP online historical population reports, which include, amongst other things, some historical maps, but also then lead students to other data, not necessarily detailed census data. And this is an important point. Sometimes the resources don't take you all the way, and there will be other resources that students would have to access outside, or indeed they would identify resources which they were unable to access but which would provide them with additional information, and that in itself of course is a valuable research skill. So the important point here is that we're asking learners to consider what it is they need to know to answer the question, rather than giving them the information that they need to answer the question. I have given this some thought, and it is possible based on the online historical population reports, but also some of the early newspaper archives which give details of building works, details of street names and cross-referencing things like bridge building projects, details of accidents that might happen and delays to building projects and so on. So there is a number of different items within the JISC digitization resources in phase 1 which would allow you to answer this question in quite interesting ways. This is just one of the learning designs within the Dialy framework, and the others are explained in similar short introductions.